All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler, and a familiar face has returned.
Well, that's right. We're actually going to preview the new season, and we needed a bit of expertise, didn't we, to be able to do that? And there's nobody with more expertise than John Kear. I'm glad to say John's a very welcome guest. Great to have you along, John. You've been with us before, a couple of months ago, I think it was. But welcome along, and for the next hour or so, I hope you're looking forward to a really great discussion about our great sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's great talking about rugby league, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
I don't, with these commentators and pundits, I mean, it's so easy because it's just like talking to your mate about something that you love, so it's pretty easy, yeah?
It is. It is.
Well, we always say it's sort of a conversation, it's a relaxed conversation. You can almost have a few beers, but maybe not at this time in the morning.
Cup of tea, actually.
Just before 9:30, you have a few cup of teas. Just make sure you haven't put anything in there, Martyn.
No, just sugar.
Yeah, just sugar. But before we get into this week's matchups, fellas, we had quite a few Challenge Cup fixtures take place over the weekend. As predicted, a lot of blowouts, but there were some close matchups. One you were commentating up, the Bradford game, John.
And what a game it was.
Yeah,
what a game.
Bradford vs Cast.
Yeah, I just think that was a tremendous game, and I think that epitomised what the Challenge Cup's all about. Mm-hmm. I think it justified the reasoning of Super League clubs entering at round 3, because it gave the opportunity of an upset. But I still believe Super League clubs should come in at round 3 and it should be an open draw.
Yes, I was going to say that I do agree with you on that. Yeah. And you'd still get those games, like Bradford v Castleford.
Yeah. You might get Saints Wigan.
You could.
Which would put one of the big boys out, but you might get North Wales against
Midlands Hurricanes.
Against Midlands, which would give them a bit of a cup run. And I just think that's the magic of a knockout competition.
Should be a completely open draw.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, just looking at the match, I wasn't there at the ground, but it looked like quite a sloppy game. Like, not sloppy, but the conditions didn't allow for dry rugby, obviously.
The conditions weren't good. There were heavy conditions. It was freezing. But it's always freezing, honestly. But it was freezing.
Even in July.
There was, an element of drizzle as well there. But the first half, Bradford were perfect. I think it was 30-odd minutes before they made the first error. So they looked after the ball, they kicked it into corners, the defensive line speed was sensational, and Castleford couldn't get out of their own half, and 17-0 reflected the game. And it was only in the second half when Bradford started making yardage errors, Castleford came into it, built some pressure, and as soon as they scored that first try, you just sensed seeds of doubt in Bradford.
The game was turning.
And confidence in Castleford, and that's why it was such a great finale.
Well, that's it. I think leading up to the match-up, we all had that match circled as this could be a potential close match or a bit of an upset from a championship club.
Certainly the game that everybody expected could be a shock if there was going to be one. But it's interesting, isn't it? Bradford have done quite a good job, actually, putting their squad together. They've got quite a lot of players with Super League experience, haven't they? To one degree or another. And James Donaldson, I think he scored the first try.
He was outstanding,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, because I remember James Donaldson coming through as a teenager at Bradford many years ago, and everybody said he's going to have a terrific future. He's a great young player. But his early career was dogged by knee injuries.
Yes, he was.
And it was such a shame, and he's such a great guy. I mean, if you know him, he's a really wonderful young guy. And I'm really pleased that he's still playing, and that he's actually pursuing a career as a quantity surveyor now. But he's still playing part time, and he's still got what it takes.
Yeah, very much so. He was instrumental in the early performance at Bradford. I thought him, Evan Skur, and Michael Lawrence, were really good in that middle channeler. But they both, as you mentioned about the Super League experience, they'd got both wingers and they'd got Blake in the three quarters, and they were really good at getting them going forward. So they've got a nice little team there, well recruited, and it was very well coached.
I mean, they look to me to be the outstanding favourites for the championship, John. And what's going to be quite interesting this year, let's assume that Bradford fulfil their potential and get to the grand final and win it. Will they then get into Super League on the basis of these gradings? That's going to be a really interesting one, I think.
That's the conundrum, and I still believed it should be weighted much more heavily with on-field performance. I really do, because we've called it franchise licensing, we've called it all sorts prior to this, and it just seems a reinvention of that.
Definitely.
Well, they escaped a bit, didn't they, this year, with London finishing bottom and Wakefield winning the grand final. That's what would have happened, if it had been a conventional promotion and relegation, those two clubs would have swapped. So the grading system didn't unduly affect what would have happened on the field. But this year it could do, couldn't it?
Very much so. And the grading system, I was scratching my head because it's said we've always wanted to expand the game. It's important we've got a team in London. And then we absolutely caned London with regard to grading and virtually told them they were out of Super League before the ball had been kicked. So I just couldn't understand it whatsoever.
No.
One thing that stood out to me, I think, for Bradford was the halves pairing. In that first half, they just steered that team around the park. Keys and Meadows, obviously a lot of experience between the two of them.
Well, again, Jamie Meadows, I really liked him when he played for London last year, actually. I think he played for Batley the year before that, didn't he? I've always quite liked that young fella, and, I thought for Bradford on Sunday showed again, that I think he's potentially a Super League player.
Yeah, I think Joe Keys but Joe's Achilles' heel is his durability. Getting him regularly on the field, because his playing ability, there's no doubt about that. It's absolutely top end, and he organised the team great. They scored off a kick of his passing game was causing them problems, and I agree with you totally, Jake, that the half-backs were excellent. And I thought that was the big difference between the two teams. I thought the half-backs of Bradford were accomplished and really structured, and I thought Castleford half-backs just didn't get the same grip on the game whatsoever.
Well, of course, they were missing Rowan Mills, weren't
Yes,
they,
they
Castleford?
were. Yeah.
And I don't know how long he's going to be out for, hopefully not too long. But let's talk about Castleford, because obviously they've had a pretty poor pre-season under a new coach, obviously Danny Maguire, and they're struggling a bit so far, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Martyn. I've watched them play against Hull in the trial. I watched play against Wakefield in a trial. And I obviously watched the Bradford game, and it hasn't been pretty watching, to tell the truth. They don't look cohesive.
No.
I think they're still trying to find out what type of team they're going to be. I still think they're trying to find how to embed these new signings in. And at the minute, the signs don't look good. So,
Well, the thing is, they've signed quite a lot of players without first-grade experience, either in Super League or the NRL. And that worked well for them last year when they signed Liam Horn, and I thought Liam Horn had an outstanding.
Yes, he was last year.
So obviously, what they probably thought there must be more from where he came, and maybe there are. But the guys they've signed this year, it's early days, isn't it?
Yes.
So you've got to be very careful that you don't prejudge a team and condemn them just on the basis of one or two defeats, but it's not looking good, and it's going to be difficult. We'll talk about the opening fixtures soon, but visiting Hull they could hardly have picked
good luck. Good luck with that. Yeah,
tougher start, could they?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and that sort of led me to my next question: should they be worried, Cas fans? Is it cause for concern, or just still too early?
Well, there will be concern, because obviously nobody likes to lose to a team in the level below them, and Cas fans are worriers, I think, aren't they, John? You've got experience of that.
I think it was the manner of the loss as well, Martyn and Jay. Because if you looked at the tries they scored, one from a kick, one was a breakaway, and there was only one really that was constructed through the shape play, which was Hoy's at the very end. So it wasn't as if they were causing Bradford major problems with the shapes and so on. So I think Cas fans have right to be worried, but they can, a victory at Hull Kingston Rovers would allay any worries whatsoever.
Of course it would, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But obviously they did have a chance to tie the match there. Tex Hoy missing that final conversion on the buzzer. I couldn't put myself in his shoes. I would have been nervous myself, but yeah, they had a chance there to equal it.
They did. It was exactly the same. When Leeds lost at Bradford in 2019, it was exactly the same. Liam Sutcliffe had a shot towards the end, and it hit the post and came out, and Bradford won by 2. So it was very, very similar to that. But I think it would have been an injustice, to tell you the truth. I thought over the 80 minutes, Bradford were the better team. And I just thought it was great that 2 drop goals, I won't call them field goals, 2 drop goals actually won the game, And it was smart play by Keys, first of all, in the first first half and Lilly in the second half, just when they were in that position to stroke it over then, and ultimately that proved the difference.
What do you think about Bradford? I mean, Jordan Lilly nominally played at hooker, didn't he, on Sunday? So they've actually got 3 half-backs on the field.
I think Joe Keys was injured, Martyn, at half-time.
Yeah, right,
He played all the second half in the halves.
Right, did he? Right,
yes,
okay.
He did, yeah.
Yeah,
it was
I've not seen that.
Suter played all the game at hooker.
Right,
and,
okay.
He obviously tired a little towards the end of the game when he played in that middle channel, but he did a great job as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, am I stating the obvious by saying, based on that performance, Bradford Bulls could mix it with Super League teams if they were in the Super League?
Well, I don't think any Super League club will be all that keen on being drawn at Bradford in the next round. That's one thing for sure. But I think having said that, I don't think they beat a top Super League club. But there are 1 or 2 Super League clubs who might be a bit nervous.
No, absolutely. All right, we'll move on to another matchup that was, quite tight, especially in the first half. We had Catalans 14 defeating Halifax 0.
0-0 at half-time, wasn't it?
Yeah. Is that surprising, I guess, for
Well, it's got to be surprising, that, hasn't it? Because from 2 angles, actually, because nobody really knew what Halifax were going to be like. They've got a fairly small squad. They've got a new coach in Kyle Eastman, who's come back into rugby league after a long spell in rugby union. So the jury was going to be out on his coaching ability. But on the strength of what we saw at the weekend, doesn't look too bad, does it?
No, they were very good.
And obviously Catalans. I think Catalans always struggle early in the season, actually. They've always got a load of new players. Some of them didn't play. I mean, Luke Kear didn't play, did he?
That's a big one, I think.
He didn't play. So they lacked his direction around the field. And I think they suffered for that, and they will have been pretty relieved to get through, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you about Catalans starting slowly generally, but there's normally a reason for that, because they're so heavily stacked with the French team, the Catalan players, and that means Steve's got a very limited pre-season. Well, I think this year they've had the longest pre-season for many, many years. So I think Catalan should be really ready this year. But I think it was the absentees that may well have been the reason behind an indifferent performance. And I think Luke here is the key behind that. If he has a good season, I believe Catalan will have a good season.
Yeah.
And maybe just a little wake-up call from them. I'm sure they'll be ready for the next tie.
Let's credit Halifax though as well. And it was. I thought 0-0 the first half. I really enjoyed that. It was a good muck and nettles, old-fashioned rugby league game. And, there's a lot to be said for that, as well as the 38 sort of 36 games as well.
Well, I'll tell you something, John. If you'd asked me a week ago about Halifax, I think I would have said they'll do well to, avoid finishing in the bottom 4 or 5. I think on that performance, that's too harsh a judgment.
Yeah,
and I think on that performance that they'll be a strong side,
and I think they'll take great confidence from that as well.
Yeah,
but again, just as we've said about Cass, it's one performance.
Yes,
so it may well
got
be
to keep it up.
Yes,
haven't
they have,
and also they've got to avoid injuries, because they are
correct.
They are more vulnerable than most sides, because as I say, the squad isn't very extensive.
I think that's the caveat on all these predictions is the injury aspect, because we just don't know, do we?
No.
It's a contact sport, and you just don't know about injuries going forward. But if teams avoid injury, if Halifax avoid injury, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There could well be a good force in the championship.
Yeah.
Now the other close fixture was the Widnes North Wales game. Widnes 26 defeating North Wales 20. Quite a tight one, that one.
That's really encouraging for North Wales, isn't it? Because they've bumped along for a few years. They're playing Colwyn Bay now. I've never been to their stadium, so I don't know what it's like. But it'd be great to see them solidifying their presence in North Wales, I think. And I think there could be potential challengers in League One this year, because Widnes were 5th in the Championship last year, and I don't think they're weaker this year than they were last year. So that's really promising by North Wales, and I think Widnes, will be relieved to have got through that. I think they were 2 points down at half time, 2018, and they scored 8 points in the second half to win it. So they'll be relieved, but pretty happy to be going into the hat for the next round.
No, definitely. All right, then we'll move on to some of the interesting news points that have happened over the last 7 days or so. Let's touch on the article that was released, was it last night or early this morning?
Yeah, last night it was John Davidson, the Rugby League journalist, writing an article in the newspaper revealing the fact that, there's a movement to unseat Simon Johnstone as the chairman of the RFL. I think what they want is to have an executive chairman who's, who can basically devote more time to the game, because Simon is a part-time non-executive chairman. I've spoken to a few people since that article was published, and most people say Simon Johnston's a really nice guy and is good at chairing meetings, but they're looking for somebody who's got more time to be more proactive in promoting the game, basically. And I've got to say, I think we do need that. John, I don't know what your view on that is.
I mean, the chairman or whatever's got to be, it's got to be visual.
Yeah, it's got to be a high profile.
Exactly right. Yeah. And it's no good just chairing meetings behind closed doors. You've got to get out there and be seen in and amongst the game. Yeah. And I think that's a letdown of the current incumbent. And I read the article 10 minutes before we started speaking, so it was dropped on my toes. But it really does seem as if there's some credence to it.
Yeah. Well, the clubs. Rugby league as a commercial operation isn't performing as well as it should do. For such a. I think it's the greatest sport in the world, but it should be generating far more interest, far more eyeballs on it, far more money should be coming into the game. What we've seen over the years is that, the salary cap has more or less remained constant, hasn't it? With players not seeing their earnings growing in the way that other sports have.
Exactly
and that's not good enough, really. It just isn't good enough. Our players deserve to be paid a lot more than they are, in my opinion. And, we need people on board who can, progress the game to reach that objective.
Yeah, I think there's been virtually a wage freeze in this in this country for the past 10 to 12 years or so.
Yes, that's right.
And our elite players, they should be paid a lot more money because they demand that because of their skill set, because of the commitment to the game. It's a hard game to play, believe you me.
Yeah.
And I don't think they are rewarded well enough at all. And we do need more revenue coming in, and we do need a more visible leader. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Now, it seems like they've identified Nigel Wood as their ideal replacement for that position. Now, I guess.
Well, the thing about Nigel is very knowledgeable about the game, isn't he? I mean, what's quite interesting about him is that he's seen the game from several different angles, because he was obviously the chief executive of the RFL till 2017. He was involved at club level with Halifax as chief exec from the mid-1990s. Is now the chairman of Bradford Bulls, so is back in the championship, and they're putting together. I think he's doing a very good job at Bradford. So Nigel's got an insight into the game that, frankly, a lot of other people don't have. And Nigel's great strength. We've got to remember that when Nigel negotiated that Sky deal in 2014, that began in 2017, they were getting 40 million quid a year.
And they were criticised for the longevity of it.
Oh yes,
and it proved to be a masterstroke.
It did, and we're now down to 21.5 million. Now and the great thing is, because Nigel negotiated that himself, there was no commission going to any agent for doing it, which would normally been about 10% or so. So, I think Nigel has a good track record, particularly with rugby league finances. I think, his weakness to some degree when he was the chief exec was that he wasn't always as good as he might have been at communicating what he was doing, particularly to, the media that might have supported what he was doing if they understood it, if he'd been better at dealing with them. So, I think you need somebody like that. And we'll see what happens.
I think he loves the game.
Oh, he does, yes.
And I think he's very knowledgeable about it.
Yeah.
And I think he'd be prepared to put his face out there and say, this is the ideas, this is the reasoning, and this is what we want to do going forward. So,
absolutely.
And that's what leaders do. That's what leaders should do. They should care about the product.
Absolutely.
They should have a vision for the product, and they should be willing to say, this is my belief, and let's go with it.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah.
And does it sound like all clubs are on board with this change? It seems like Lee and Leeds have been...
I think most of them are
revealed. Yeah,
but who's we've not spoken to everybody, have we? So we don't know what everybody's opinion is. But I'd be very surprised. I think Nigel does have a lot of support, not just among the Super League clubs, but among the Championship and League One clubs as well.
So,
I really do. And let's not forget that since he's been at Bradford, he will have been meeting Championship club leaders every week, won't he, when they've been playing?
And the other one, Martyn, he gets about the game.
Yes.
Because he loves watching the game.
Yeah.
It's frequently at clubs all over the M62.
Yeah,
so
well, I think his lad had been playing with Brighouse Rangers, hadn't he? Or somebody, one of his son who, he comes from a rugby league family.
Yes, yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
All right, fellas. What I will do is we'll touch on some of the other news before we get into some of our bold predictions for the season. Had news this morning, Christian Welch in the NRL. He's going to retire. Obviously, had a great career with Melbourne Storm, Queensland, Australia. I'm not sure if he's made his Australian debut, but
no, I'm not sure. I can't remember that. But
medically retired with a back injury.
Yeah, he's very good on TV. Is Christian Welch as well? If he gets on quite a lot of TV programs in Australia and talks really well about the game. So I think there's a future career beckoning for him there, and maybe that's part of the reason why he has retired. Who knows?
Because it's such high profile in Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, they tend to look after their recently retired players really well with things like media or ambassadorial sort of jobs.
Right.
So, which is good because that's what they should do.
Yeah.
Because we ask them to put the body on the line week in, week out, which obviously it has done over at Melbourne, and I think we've a right to sort of keep them involved. And I also think we're too ready to leave people, let people drift out of the game.
Of course,
who've got a vast knowledge and vast experience. I always feel John Joyner, my old teammate at Cass, he went into coaching Castleford Wigan in that Regal Trophy final '93. He had a hiccup of a season, and then he's been lost to the game since then. Well, I think he had too much knowledge just to say bye, John. I think we should have found a way of involving him in the game because he had some great ideas about how the game should be played.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes,
that's the one thing about Welsh. He's always been quite outspoken. He's been a bit of a voice for the players as well. He's very intelligent, and I think he's also done a business degree. He went over to colleges in America during his off-season time to do further study. So
we can imagine somebody like him further down the track, being in a very high position within the game, can't you? Maybe even running it. Who knows? As time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So big loss for Storm, but I'm sure he'll stay involved. So it won't be the last we see of him. All right, let's get into some of our bold predictions of the season. Let's start with our placing. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Who's going to be the bottom 4, the middle 4, and the top 4 of Super League? Let's start with the bottom 4. Martyn, would you like to go first?
Well, I think...
Thank you.
I'll give you a bit of time to think about it. The bottom 4... well, Castleford, I think, are going to... We've already said that they're struggling.
I'll just say that it doesn't have to be in order. You can just say, I think these 4 teams, but
I think,
put it up in the thirds.
I think Huddersfield, from what we've seen so far, they're going to be struggling as well. So I'd say those 2. You've got to say Wakefield are the newcomers to Super League, so they're the one I'm least certain about. Because
you're right to be least certain about that, because I don't think Wakefield will be in the bottom 4.
No, I'm not absolutely convinced. But I'll say Wakefield will be in the bottom 4, and the other one you would tend to say would be Hull, wouldn't you? Again, based on last year's evidence. But again, a new coach, John Cartwright, maybe new determination, and who knows where they might be, but on the face of it, I'd say those 4. So if it's not those 4, John, Who do you think Wakefield would be replaced by?
I'm going with 3 of those, so
Yeah.
I'll agree with you on 3 of those. I'm going to reserve, excuse me, my 4th one until we've had a good discussion, and hopefully it'll just fall into the.
It won't be
into place.
Wigan, will it? Anyway, that's
It certainly won't be Wigan. No. But I honestly think Wakefield have got the quality of player, and I think they've prepared well enough to be in that middle section where they're looking perhaps at position 6 or 5 of the playoffs.
Could even make the playoffs.
Yes,
Yeah.
or 7 or 8. So that's my prediction for Wakefield. But I'm biased a bit with Wakefield, I must admit.
What's your prediction then, Jake?
Yeah, I'd have to say I'd agree with the same 3 you said, Martyn. But yeah, that 3rd spot could be interchangeable between Wakefield, Salford and Leigh, I think.
You think Leigh might fall a bit?
Salford, though, now that Salford have gotten there, hopefully the takeover's been figured out. God,
Well, don't forget
It is hard. It's hard, isn't it?
Don't forget that Salford won at St Helens in pre-season convincingly.
Yeah.
And you know they are. People tell me who were at that game. I've not seen it, but people tell me they were absolutely brilliant. So you know, and really played St Helens off the park. So you know, it's really fascinating.
Salford
isn't
have
it?
done it year in, year out, haven't they? I mean, you know, everybody always tips Salford as being 9, 10, 11 or 12 and they end up getting the playoffs. And that's credit to the club, and it's obviously credit to the coaching staff there, where I think Paul Rowley, year in, year out, he works wonders with them. So
he does.
That's why I
and
think
they have
Salford's
strengthened a bit this year
they
as
have,
well. You know, so they're no mugs, are they?
Well, the recruitment sense, they always seem to pick up players who haven't settled at other clubs, but they get to Salford and it just fits them like a glove. And I think in part that's down to the environment that Paul Rowley creates.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to say. I was going to say, we could almost say, based on the weekend's results, who knows where Catalans are going to end up, but I'm sure they'll...
I think Leigh are a really interesting case, aren't they? Because they finished 5th last year, and they won the first round of the playoff at Salford, and only got knocked out in the semi-final at Wigan. But they've lost some really key players, and the real big question is, can the players who they've signed really replace the players who left? And big question mark, not been answered yet. And yet in pre-season, the one at Warrington, you know, they had a very easy win, obviously, at Workington in the Cup, 60-0, I think it was, wasn't it? So on the face of it, you know, things are looking quite good for Leigh, I think. This young lad, David Armstrong, who's going to play at full back, looks a really useful capture to me.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be one of the exciting signings of Super
League. He was the understudy to Caelan Ponga at Newcastle, so, you know, you can understand.
So he ain't a bad player.
No.
So,
no.
And, you know, and he did make some first grade games for Newcastle.
He did, yeah,
and he did. He looked very good indeed. So I think the new signings is a big question mark against Leigh, and that's why I'm only prepared at this moment to commit to 3 of the bottom 4. So we'll carry on chatting, and hopefully I'll get the 4th one eventually.
Well, do you want to? Is it easier for us to move into the middle 4, or do you want to go to the top 4?
Top 4 is easier.
Top 4, that might knock
top
a few
4
out.
is easier because obviously it has to be Wigan, it has to be Hull KR.
Yeah.
And I think I'll stick my neck out here and say I think Leeds might be back in the top 4.
Right.
I think Leeds under Brad Arthur this year. I mean, I'd feel that more if Mike Acevo hadn't been injured. Yeah. You know, that's the biggest disappointment in pre-season for me is Mike Acevo getting injured because I've been really looking forward to seeing him, and obviously we won't now see him in Super League this year. But I still think they could potentially make it into the top 4, and I'd say the other one would probably, St Helens or Warrington. I think I'd go for St Helens over Warrington actually, and I think that Warrington might be squeezed back into 5th place. So I think, as I say, Wigan, Hull KR, Leeds, and St Helens. Yep. John, put me right.
Well, I think Wigan. Everybody, they're the standard bearers, aren't they? So it's up to everybody else in Super League, A, to challenge them, and B, to beat them. So, Wigan's got to be up there in the top 4. I think Hull Kingston Rovers, the rise of Hull Kingston Rovers has been one of the great stories in recent years. 2016 they were in the Championship. And now we're talking about them as being established as a top 4, and everybody's expecting them this year to lift some silverware simply because how they haven't progressed from bottom to top like that. It's been a seamless transition, and that's when it's sustainable, So
making marginal improvements every year.
Correct. So Hulkinson Rover's got to be in there. I think Warrington will be in there.
Yeah.
But there's a question mark against second season syndrome with the new coach.
Sam,
There's the question mark as well at St Helens. What effect will Lee Breers have? He may well, re-spark them. So
yes.
Saints might be up there. So if it was me, I'd go with Wigan, Hulkinson Rovers, Warrington, and I'm going to be a bit staid and go Saints, I think.
So you don't think Leeds will get in the top 4?
No.
I probably agree with you, John. Only with the Saints, I'd say last year they suffered a lot of injuries.
Yep.
And if they can stay healthy this season, I think it'll be a different story. Obviously, the Lee Breers factor, as you said, adds an interesting element to their attack. Yep. Tristan Sadler comes in.
Yeah. Well, he apparently played quite well in that Challenge Cup game against West Hull, which was remarkable, wasn't it? Because they got 5,000 people watching them at Craven Park, which was an outstanding achievement. And, a lot of those people got in free, apparently, because they weren't expecting that many turning up.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
But that's another Cup reason. We spoke earlier about the Cup being opening in round 3. That's another reason why. And, what an experience for those West Hull players.
Yes, exactly.
To play against a Lomax, play against a Wellsby, play against a Walmsley. It's fantastic for them.
Yes.
And that's a dream. If you haven't made it in the pro game, that's a dream as an amateur player to actually go out and have 80 minutes again and be able to tell your lad or your grandson, this is what I did, and I've got the video of doing that. I just think it's part of the dream of rugby league players.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's ruled out a lot of teams from the top 4 and then the bottom 4 and 3.
John.
So we're left with a certain pool of teams in the middle there. Catalans,
Warrington, Lee, Salford, and Catalans.
That's right.
9-4. Yeah, probably in that order.
Warrington, Lee.
Yeah, although Catalans, I don't know. Maybe I'm being harsh on them.
That's the one.
He's got to remain uninjured, hasn't he?
Yeah. If he settles in and plays really well for them, they've got to be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, you think so.
But if he has a stop-start season, and if injuries take there, they may well find themselves as the 9th club. So it balances on things like that, does rugby league, and rightly so. And it's great, I think, that we're having this discussion because we can't nail it as perhaps...
No. None of us can be sure of anything, can we?
That's right.
The question is, John, can anybody beat Wigan this year? Obviously they won everything last year. Shame for them that they can't play the World Club Challenge this year. It would have been a great game to play in Las Vegas, wouldn't it, if people had thought of it in that way. But it's not going to be. So can they win the Challenge Cup again? Can they win the Super League title again? Obviously the answer is yes, but the real question is, can anybody stop them?
But again, we spoke about Kear staying healthy for Cat. French and Field have got to stay healthy as well for week. And when they were missing, which they did for a part of last year, and that's one thing I thought Matt Pete and the Wigan club did so well, was manage when they were missing. But the form did dip. And the results did dip when they were missing. So again, they're absolutely instrumental to their success. And if French or Field are missing for a period of time, you may well see people beating Wigan, perhaps by default, but beating them.
Well, you remember when Adrian Lamb coached Wigan, and both of those guys were unavailable for most of the year.
Correct.
And, they had a disappointing season. Everybody said Wigan are hopeless as an attacking force. Well, obviously, if you lose those two guys...
Got the 2 best players now,
you're going to be pretty...
But Harry Smith's developed, hasn't he, as well? He's developed into a really good quality scrum half.
Absolutely, with a great kicking game as well. Possibly the best in the competition, apart from Mark Sneed, of course. I think Wigan are so formidable. And when you go to Wigan, and I went for their media day. We went, didn't we? Because we had Matty Pete on the show a few weeks ago, and you see the sort of togetherness that there is at Wigan. They've got a great spirit that it's difficult to sort of break.
They do everything right, Martyn.
Yeah.
Right the way through, from the scholarship, right the way through to the elite first team. They just do everything right. There's a connection between the club and the community. There's a connection between the players and the fans, and that's why the minute they are on the crest of a wave. And good on them because they've earned it.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the thing. We spoke about identity earlier in the podcast. They know what their identity is. They've got that culture, and they've got the depth in their squad too to replace those players when they are injured. So I think they know who they are, and it's going to be tough to stop them.
I always take the Pierce-Paul went to Newcastle the other year, and everybody's scratching their head. Who's going to take his place? Willie Ice then gets injured, and then this kid comes in June and December, and everybody's thinking, well, who's bothered about Kai Pierce-Paul? Let him stay in Australia. So, and they seem to have a production line, and what they do so well as well, they don't clog the production line. They don't top end it so that it's difficult for kids to come through. I think they've got so much trust and belief in what they're producing that they make sure the pathway's there to ease them into first team players. And Zach Eckers has been a great example of how they've done it.
Marvellous, yeah. Well, it reminds me of Penrith in Australia. They've got a similar system where they can lose players every year, as they do, don't they? But their success carries on regardless.
And Melbourne.
Yes.
It's no surprise that they've been two of the most successful clubs in the NRL in recent years.
Well, I always think I was reading an article some time ago by the chief executive at Melbourne, who was saying that they've got a good idea of what their first team is going to be like in 5 years' time. Because they can anticipate guys coming through. Obviously, you can never be certain in that respect, but that planning is so. They're not just planning on a year-by-year basis.
No.
I think that's what's also benefited Wigan so much is the fact that Matty Pete had a lot to do with developing that junior pathways when he was coming through. Obviously, they promoted him from within as well until he reached the head coaching role. But I'm sure he coached youngsters back then.
He's a brilliant advert for promoting from within.
But Sean Wayne as well. Sean Wayne also worked in the academy. And he worked with the younger players before he got the main gig. So they do it regularly. And credit to Chris Radlinski, who seems to be orchestrating it. I mean, Matt Pete rightly gets loads of plaudits, but I think Chris Radlinski should get some as well because he's overseeing all that, and he's just become such an accomplished operator. And now you look at him and think, well, he could run the game without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes. And be very, be a great guy to do it, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know whether he's interested, but who knows?
No.
Have to ask him.
And when you're looking at the
You'll
bottom
write his
four,
reference, John.
Yeah, I will do. But when you look at the bottom four, there's all these conundrums, and I'd prefer to have bottom three or top four, and then let the rest fight it out because we don't know about Salford as well. Salford have got new owners. But what sort of effect is that? You've seen that they've been welcomed in, but you don't know what sort of effect it will have ultimately on the playing group.
It's interesting you say that because what we don't know, I mean, Paul King, who's been their chief executive for the last, goodness knows, several years now, I mean, you've got to give him some credit.
Very much
for being able to sign all these guys, as you say. They sign players. A player like Nenny MacDonald, who fell out at Leeds and got pushed out, because he went back to Australia and then didn't come back when he should have done, apparently. So Leeds effectively sacked him, and Salford snapped him up, and he's been brilliant for them.
Yeah, very much
and
so.
it's Paul King sort of, I think, did a great job in signing Nenny MacDonald and several other players, Mark Sneed, for example, and he's now departed the club. I think he's gone on holiday. I think he found it very stressful, the whole, thing of trying to sort the club out to new owners. But he won't be there, so will the new people be as smart as he was?
And it's that's a question mark. Be against them, and the Leeds question mark is the new players coming in. So you can make cases for everyone. So I might opt out of the bottom four.
Yeah, that's all right. I guess the other interesting thing with Salford is it's yet to have been given that final approval from the
By
RFL,
the
hasn't
RFL,
it?
yeah.
So we're
As
yet
we
to
speak,
see.
I mean, who knows? They've got to give it very soon, haven't they? Because they're putting a side out against St Helens on Saturday, and they've got to get the go-ahead to register all the players to be able to play in that game. So
Paul Rowley's was restricted in his selection, wasn't he, for the Midlands game in the Challenge Cup? So, he needs to be free for his selection.
Yeah.
Again, that's something that could affect where Salford finish ultimately.
Yes, it could.
And we often see that in the last week of the year or the season. How many fixtures will determine placings on the ladder. So 2 points is everything in this competition.
Absolutely,
isn't it? We'll move on to some of our other bold predictions, fellas. Who do you think is going to be in the grand final for Super League?
Well, you'd think Wigan and Hull KR again, wouldn't you? But who knows? I could see St Helens getting there again. Warrington or Leeds, who knows? We keep saying, don't we? We'd like a new winner of the grand final, and of all the clubs that have never won it before, I think you've got Hull KR and Warrington. I mean, I think a final between Hull KR and Warrington would be tremendous, actually. Yeah. I'd love to see that. Obviously, any Wigan fans watching will turn off at this moment. But, I think for the good of the game, it would be great to see more, the trophies going round more clubs.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to discount Wigan because I think everybody's going to tip them. So I'm going to go for Warrington to do the Super League. I'm going to go for Hull Kingston Rovers to do the Challenge Cup.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Right.
Yep. I'll mix it up then. I'll go Hull KR Warrington grand final.
Mm-hmm.
Something completely different. Hopeful.
Yeah.
Challenge Cup. Bradford Bulls. No. Let's go. Challenge Cup. I'll go Rovers for the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, Hull KR. Yeah.
I think Hull Kingston Rovers are going to win a trophy this year.
Yeah.
I really do because they've progressed.
They're up for it, aren't they?
They've just progressed year on year.
Yeah.
And the next sort of sign off of the progression would be a trophy.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to win something.
Yeah.
Let's go the championship. Who do you think will win the championship?
Bradford, without the slightest doubt.
I think Bradford, I think they've got a very strong squad. I think there's a belief growing at the club, and I think they'll be there. But I think Featherstone will be dark
looking
horses.
pretty good, aren't they?
Are. Yeah, I think they've gone under the radar this year. In all previous years, everybody's looked at them and said, "Oh, they've signed that," but they've just nicely gone along there. And James Ford's done a good job, and he's got Paul Cook there, and Paul Cook's a really canny,
smart guy.
Yeah, he is. He's canny with his attacking
rugby league
plays.
better than anyone.
And York, I think, are a bit of a dark horse as well. So I'd go Bradford as the favourite, but just keep your eye out for Featherstone and York.
The funny thing about York, I mean, they got beaten 44-2 by Hull KR, but they never quite looked that bad, did they?
They didn't play that. It wasn't a 44-2 game.
No, not really.
No.
But they just couldn't break the Hull KR defence. They came fairly close a few times. But I thought, gosh, it's an unfair scoreline on them, really, in a way.
Martyn, everybody has difficulties with the Hull KR defence. They lost the grand final, but they only conceded one try.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what Willie Peters really has brought to Hull Kingston Rovers is this commitment to defence, and I think their online. I love their online defence because they look as if they're broken, and then all of a sudden somebody crops up and they get the body underneath the ball or something like that, or numbers will push him back into the field of play. So I love watching Hull KR defending on their own line. I'm sure Willie Peters hope they aren't defending their own line very often, but I like watching them in that case.
But sometimes you've got to.
Yeah, exactly right.
And the key thing is not to concede. That's
and they
really
don't concede
important.
many at all. They don't. So it's intriguing.
Yeah.
Right, and then League One. Who do you think will take out League One?
That's a really interesting question. I wonder about Rochdale this year. I think Rochdale might be, dark horses there, and maybe North Wales Crusaders. After what we were saying about them, the way they played against Widnes, maybe they're about to come through and make an impression.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw Oldham into the Championship one as well.
Yeah.
So I'll throw into that conundrum.
Well, Oldham had a really big win against Barrow.
Yes,
in the Challenge Cup, and they've got some good players.
And as League One, I think Keighley we've been a little skewed because they had a lot of players missing when they got whacked by York in the Challenge Cup, and I think when they get some players back, they'll be better. I agree with Matt about North Wales. They spent a bit more money, it looks, if they'll feature. And my mate Mark Dunning's coaching Midlands, so I think he won coach the year last year, and I think they'll continue progressing as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
It would,
to have
yes,
a team based in Birmingham playing well.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for North Wales. It'd be great to see them at the top of League One. So
you ought to have a trip down there to see a game at Colwyn Bay.
Yeah, it would be
a nice place to visit, actually.
It is,
in a summer's day.
It's a nice little stadium as well. It's where the Rugby Union had their centre of excellence for Northern Wales, but it didn't do West Rugby Union much good, did it? So,
no, did they still have that, by the way?
I don't know now. I don't know. But, it's somewhere where
their coach has just walked away, hasn't he?
He has, Warren Gatland. Yeah.
So gosh.
Now, the other bold prediction, Man of Steel pick. Who are you taking, Martyn?
Hard to look beyond Bevan French, isn't it? You know, but you never know, because the Man of Steel is different these days compared to what it used to be. You know, at one time, the Man of Steel was selected by a panel at the end of the season, and I'm a great believer that the Man of Steel ideally should be a real tough forward who's done the hard yards, but those guys never pick up the points.
Correct.
During the season.
Halfbacks.
Of course it is.
Halfbacks
Yeah.
or fullbacks.
So you can't look beyond.
Pick up the points.
You know, you talked about Bevan French. If Warrington have a good year, then George Williams is going to be a strong contender. You know, and it's difficult to look beyond those guys, isn't it? You know, Harry Smith maybe for Wigan might be a potential contender as well, but who knows?
I'm like you, man. I'd love to see it revert to the old way, and because it is skewed in favour of the halfbacks or fullbacks. And I know which player I'm most looking forward to seeing in Super League, and that's Jared Ferreira-Hargreaves. I'm just absolutely. I cannot wait for him to play this week.
Yeah,
because,
I bet Castleford are not looking forward to it.
No, I agree, but you know, he's got this aura about him, hasn't he? And you know, within the NRL, he was well respected.
Well, I'll tell you
he's just an enforcer.
I'll tell you something. I went to the Hull KR Media Day a couple of weeks ago, and I'd put down to speak to Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, and you know, you were there, and you know, and he comes out and you know sees me and realises he's got to speak to me, and I'm back to being a 6-year-old kid again. You know, you sort of slightly in awe of players like that, and you know, you think, gosh, you know, is this really him? You know, that I'm now speaking to, having watched him for such a long time. And he was a lovely guy, of course, as they always are. You know, and it was a real pleasure to speak to him, and I can't even really remember what he said because it sort of flows over you a bit in a way. And it was great, and a very good media day that they had at Hull KR. You know, and you do sense that you know they are on the verge, as you say, John, of winning something this year, and if they do, I think JWH will be
I think he's the final piece in that jigsaw, just going in there. Yeah. So I can't wait for him to play this week.
And again, let's wish him all the best of luck with his you know no injury whatsoever for the whole season, hopefully.
And I like the suspension thing as well, Martyn. You know, the fact that it's points, so perhaps we won't see as many people miss it through suspension this year
let's hope
as the tot up, because I'm a big believer. We as fans want to see the best players. We don't want to see them sat in the stand because they've done a sort of a reckless high tackle or something. We want to see the best players on the field, and hopefully this new totting up system will allow us to get the best players on the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because there's nothing more like disappointing, I think, especially seeing, like, I think there's a few players that got a multi-week suspension for touching a player while they're injured.
Yeah.
It's just like, I understand we shouldn't be doing that, but 3 or 4 weeks suspension for something like that. Come on now. But anyway, we'll see what happens in the season. There'll be plenty of gripes to be had with decisions made at the panel.
No doubt something will get changed after about 3 or 4 weeks.
Before we get into this weekend's matchups, any other bold predictions you fellas would like to make? We've sort of covered a lot there.
What I'd like to predict, what I hope will happen, is that we'll see bigger crowds and bigger TV viewing figures on Sky, because it's a really crucial season this year for Sky, because you know negotiations will begin at some point later this year for a new contract from 2028, because it's the new contract from 2027, because this is the second year of a 3-year contract. So it's very important that things go well this year, because if we're going to try and reverse that decline in contractual money coming from the broadcasting deal, then it's got to be this year that stimulates that, hasn't it? So I'm not predicting that, but I'm hoping for it. And if we it's going to start well, because Wigan v Leigh this Thursday night, more than 20,000 tickets sold.
Great, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's starting on the right foot. Friday night game on TV, Hull Kear v Castleford. Sellout crowd. We need to be able to project the game with big crowds, don't we?
I agree. And that's really my big one is an uptick in attendances across the board.
Yeah.
And a further increase in Challenge Cup final and Super League final.
Absolutely.
And England to beat Australia at the end of the year.
Oh, that would be the icing on the cake, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we've got Vegas as well. Hopefully that'll draw some more attention to the game, especially Super League. It's going to be very exciting, that's for sure.
Well, Vegas last year was tremendous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's great to see, Warrington and Wigan go. And again, this is something, harking back to the article that you mentioned previously, that came about because of Chris Ladlinski and Carl Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, it did.
Let's not hide behind that. They were the driving force behind it.
Yes.
Well, ventures like that, the governing body should be the driving force behind it. It really should.
Yeah.
So,
you can. I mean, you look at what Look at Peter Vlandis in Australia. Vlandis, says we're going to invite Donald Trump to that game.
Yep.
Well, even if he doesn't come, it still generates a lot of publicity when he does that, doesn't it? I presumably he won't be there, but at least you get onto the pages of the newspapers by making those sort of statements. And our people, I don't know, I just get the feeling our people would be frightened to death of saying anything like that.
Yeah. Well, they would, but he's been here, there, and everywhere, hasn't he? He's changed America in about 3 weeks.
It was at the Super Bowl at the weekend, wasn't he?
So you never know. Know. It certainly wouldn't do us any harm anyway.
It wouldn't, no.
All right, Martyn, well, how about we get into this weekend's matchups? I haven't written them down here, but thanks to your great memory,
Thursday, Wigan versus Leigh. As we say, more than 20,000 people there. Yeah. It was that, which is going to be a tremendous sight for, they've got the Lathams playing, the, band, local Wigan band before the game, a very popular band for those who, love that, who love music, great entertainment. So it's going to be a real extravaganza, I think. It's going to be a real test for Leigh, isn't it? My feeling is that Wigan will almost certainly win the game, but the real question is, what will the margin be?
Yeah.
And I hope it's going to be a very small margin. In fact, I'd like to see Leigh win it. To really, if Leigh could win that game, it would really set everybody talking, wouldn't it?
Well, I think Leigh will have focused on a good start, because last year they had a stinker of a start, and that might have been down to injuries.
It was, yeah.
And then they did it so well to get in the playoffs. I think by getting in the playoffs, they'd taken all the energy out of them.
Yes.
So they need a better start, and what better way to start than by, beating Wigan?
But they've never beaten them in the Super League, have they?
No.
So,
it's a big ask. It is.
There's no doubt about it. But, if these... We mentioned players like David Armstrong earlier, obviously Lachlan Lamb and so on. If these players are going to really show what they're about, then this is the game to do it in, isn't it?
It is. And the start of the season, Wigan may well be a little bit ring rusty.
Yeah.
But I still think Wigan will win, but I think it would be great for the game if Leigh did win.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now we'd be changing our predictions if Leigh were to cause a bit of an upset on Thursday night.
Yeah.
And then we have some matchups on Friday as well, Martyn.
Yes, Hull Kear v Castleford. Well, I think that's going to be the blowout game of the weekend, personally. Unfortunately, I hate saying that, because I'd love to see Castleford do well, but I can't see them getting within 20 points of Hull Kear. Can you, John?
Well, this is the question mark against Castleford, because they've been criticised roundly of the team, and if I know rugby league players, if you criticise, what you do, you like to prove a point.
Oh, yes.
And I think they'll definitely be going there to prove a point. So I do think Hull Kear will win, but I don't think it will be as big a margin as perhaps everybody's expected at this point in time.
Do you think Castleford will rally?
I think they'll rally, yeah. And I think simply professional pride and the competitive instinct of professional rugby league players will cause them to rally, but I still think Hull Kear will just be too good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I hope you're right, actually. I really do.
And
the other game on Friday night is Catalans versus Hull FC.
Which could have the makings for a close match.
Well, Hull are an interesting club because I wrote a piece this week in League Express pointing out how many good young players Hull have. If you look at Hull's squad, they've got loads of young lads, 21, 20, 19 and so on, who are really promising players. And in another 2 or 3 years' time, they might have the basis of a really good squad. But this year is probably a bit too early for them, really.
Yeah.
They have recruited some really experienced guys, haven't they? Jordan Rapiner is obviously one. They've got Cade Cust, who they signed from Salford. Aidan Caesar, Cade Cust and Aidan Caesar at half-back. Could work. Difficult to... we need to see it, don't we?
I think Assie Archer will be a big play for them as well. I mean, he ran the middle channel for Lee, and I think he'll be employed in a similar role at Hull, where he's the ball-playing middle channel player. So, but he needs to stay fit, because obviously last year he did suffer a fair bit with injuries, so he needs to stay fit. But it is interesting. It's a very interesting game. And again, there's the Luke Kear situation with Catalan, but I just think Catalan are too good for them.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, they let Jordan Abdul go. Sign Jordan Abdul, but then let him go because...
But I think that's a bit like the Man United boss and Rashford. I think there was a standard about you've got to train a certain manner, get on the field, and if you're not going to do that, you're not going to be at the club. And I think sometimes that line's got to be drawn.
Be interested to see if Jordan Abdul comes back again anywhere else, won't it? Because he's a very talented guy.
He is a talented player, yes.
He really is.
That's it. I think Cartwright would have pretty high standards on and off the pitch. So,
well, you don't come from where he came from, do you?
No.
If you ain't been amongst a great environment.
Exactly,
No, that's right. And then 2 matches on Saturday, Martyn, is it?
Yes, the first one is Leeds versus Wakefield, which 3 o'clock at Headingley.
I think that's the best one.
Yeah.
The best one of the weekend.
Yes, and I think they'll get a big crowd. I think there'll be a load of Wakefield fans there.
Yep.
I think they'll absolutely pack out the standing end at Headingley, the West Terrace. Do you think Wakefield could snatch it, John?
Wakefield were very good, but obviously they can only play the goal team that they played. They were very good, but what the show signs of is playing the Darryl Powell way. He's worked with Truman before. Lino looks a new player. He obviously had last year with Lino as well. So Lino and Truman know Darryl very well. Max Jowett knows Darryl very well. Liam Hood knows Darryl very well.
Yeah.
So they've got a settled spine and a settled squad. So they will challenge teams, but it's going to be a cracking game at Headingley because obviously there's the revolution at Headingley going on.
Absolutely.
There, so it's which one takes precedence. So I think that's a real question mark game. I really do. But if you were going to push me, I'd just say Leeds slightly. It'd be very close.
There's some interesting stuff in the paper today about Harry Newman at Leeds, who's been taken to one side by Brad Arthur and sort of he's impressed on him. That you've got to take a mature approach to playing the game. He's no longer a kid. He's a young adult, and I think he's 24 now, and it's time for him to shine because he's incredibly talented. Newman's saying he's learnt that lesson. And if he has, I think he's going to be a real sensation.
Well, I can tell you one thing they won't be doing under Brad Arthur is punt kicking across their own 20-metre line.
No.
They won't be doing that. It'll be a game based on possession, field position, and aggressive defence. It really will. So
it's going to be a game.
They'll be a bit different with Leeds this year than they were last year.
Yeah, if anybody's watching who's not got a ticket for that game yet, get one because it's going to be a real, a real humdinger. There's no doubt about it.
Should be a great atmosphere.
Sorry, but we spoke about people. I'm really excited about Rhys Martyn at Hull KR because the Achilles heel that Hull Kingston Rovers had last year, and I know Mikey Lewis won't like me alluding to it, was the goal kicking.
Yeah.
It really was. And
it could have been crucial, couldn't it?
Yes, it could. They couldn't convert fours into sixes regularly. Well, they will this year, so I think that makes them an even more dangerous team than they were before. And I think we spoke about Varaya Hargraves. I think he's a great sign as well as Rhys Martyn.
And not just for his goal kicking, actually.
No, he's a great second rower,
He is.
That's it, and he brings a senior voice to that group, leadership. It's just great. It's always good to have those older heads.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he was scoring against York on Friday night, wasn't he? So he's really...
Don't miss many. He doesn't miss many.
He's dangerous close to the line.
The other match
Saints versus Salford on Saturday, and that's being shown live on BBC Two, which is great, isn't it? You know, so it's going to 5:30 kickoff, exposure on BBC Two as well as on Sky Sports Plus. So Salford went there a few weeks ago and beat Saints 40 points to 12, and people tell me that they look great. Assuming that they can play their strongest side, they'll be a genuine threat to St Helens again, won't they? I think St Helens will improve radically from that defeat. It was Morgan Knowles' testimonial game.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
But it's going to be. It's one of those that's not that easy to call, I think, that
it
game.
Isn't. No, not at all. Not at all. And, again, there's the effect of Lee Breers, That's another thing I'm really looking forward to see, because the Broncos played some great attacking rugby under Lee, and it helped Wigan as well. Matty Peake will acknowledge that when he was at Wigan. So I think that factor going to St Helens will make that really interesting.
Well, it's interesting actually, John, because under Christian Welch, Saints became a much stronger defensive side. But I thought that some of the flamboyancy that we used to associate with St Helens disappeared. And they played a much tighter sort of game. And I'd love to see some of that come back a bit. I'd love to see them taking more risks in various parts of the field. And I get the feeling that under Lee Breers that might happen.
It may well, and you can take risks when you've got a good defence.
Oh, of course you can.
And St Helens tend to have a good defence, and I think that's why Wigan and Hull KR are so good. They can take the risk because they can back themselves to defend that set. If they make an error, all right, you've got the ball, we'll just defend it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they've got the strike to do it. You look at their spine: Sadler, Wellesby, Lomax, Clark. Like they've got that. They can the ability to play an attacking brand of rugby, don't they?
And Jake, they know full well they didn't have a good season last year, so that's another one where it's affected the professional pride of them as coaches and of players.
And this young man Tristan Saylor is going to be an interesting guy for them, isn't he? Because he's got a great pedigree. I mean, obviously, genetically his father Wenville. So I really used to like him when he was at Brisbane Broncos, but he didn't get that much game time, did he? And then he had a bit of a problem off the field that affected him. Fortunately, that he was finally got the okay, didn't he, on that one? But now he's here, and I think he could be a real astute signing for Saints.
Absolutely. Just quickly on the Saints, I was just thinking before what coaches could be on the hot seat. Do you think Paul Wellens is on the hot seat?
Well, every coach is every coach is under pressure. John, you know that more than anyone, don't you?
I think if you look, it's who's going to get the OBE out before Easter, isn't it? So if you lose 4 or 5 early doers, you're under pressure. So I don't think anybody's under pressure at the minute, because every coach will be saying we've all had great pre-seasons. We can't wait for the season.
Nobody's lost a game yet.
We've improved. We've got 100% record up to now. Well, after 4 or 5 games there'll be some different records. So I think that'll be reevaluated then.
Definitely. And then one more match on the Sunday.
Yes, Huddersfield versus Warrington. Again, Huddersfield, nobody's predicting big things for them this year. And maybe they'll be able to, use that to do better than what everybody expects, I think. I would hope so, because, Huddersfield need a good season, don't they?
They do.
There's been too much discussion in the close season about them this ridiculous idea of moving to Halifax and moving out of the John Smith Stadium. view, John, is that they ought to sell more bloody tickets for the John Smith Stadium.
You know me,
get
Matt,
more
I've
people
said it
into
loads of times before. I think we play too many games with these low fixtures, so on. They should reduce the number of games. And instead of just saying, we'll sack a coach because he hasn't won so many games, sack the commercial manager if he hasn't packed the stand out.
Precisely, yes.
That's his job.
Yes.
Well, if you're not doing your job, you're on your way, because that coach, if he don't win some games, he's on his way.
That's right.
And I'd turn it around like that, me, and let's turn some heat up on him.
Yes.
So I sat in an office and saying, I've got an appointment with so-and-so. Well, get out there, have the appointment, get some people in to watch the game.
Precisely. Yeah, that's a great point, actually.
But that's just me. That's my rant, is that, Marty? Sorry.
I've got to say, Jake, if you're going to put something on TikTok of a little extract from this discussion, what John just said is a great thing to put there. I really think so. I mean, Warrington, on the face of it, you'd think Warrington would win easy, wouldn't you, John? I'd have thought on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm going for Warrington, because I think Sam Burgess has certainly got something about him that the players love.
Yeah,
and and I think they'll continue their progress. We spoke. Is there a second season syndrome? I don't think there will be, because I think sort of Sam's standing within the club and within that group of players. So I think Warrington will win.
Well, it reminds me a bit of when Malcolm really coached Castleford. People used to say, Castleford players, nobody dare play badly.
No. Because he called you out.
Yes.
He called you out in the sheds at half time and full time, and he called you out on the field.
Yeah.
And
I think Sam's got that same aura as Malcolm had. But interesting, Tom Burgess playing against team coached by his brother. That's an interesting little side issue there, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And I really hope Tom plays well for Huddersfield, and does lead them to success.
I'm excited to see Leon Hayes return after that.
He was so lucky last year, wasn't he?
He'll play this week, won't he? Assuming.
I'm not absolutely sure.
I think he's still.
I don't think he played at Whitehaven.
No, he didn't. No. Right. I think it's Holly Leyland will be in the house with.
Who's also actually a very good player, and played well at Whitehaven. So I don't think they'll be missing all that much.
I don't think he's quite ready yet, isn't Leon? So
it was a bad injury when he did.
It was a bad injury, very bad one over at Salford. Yeah,
we'll wait and see. But I'm looking forward to his eventual return.
They've
got that luxury where they don't have to rush him back, I guess.
Yes.
It's set to be an exciting.
Well, they've got Steph Ratchford as well, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like it's a bit like Leeds, isn't it? Lucky Miller's injured at fullback, but they've got Jake Connor.
Yeah.
To just fit into that role.
Yeah.
Seamlessly, really. So it just shows. You pick your squad right, and you can allow for injuries.
And I think Brad Arthur will be the perfect coach for Jake Connor.
Yes,
I do.
Yes,
I do.
It's a bit like what I was saying earlier about Harry Newman. I'm sure he's taken Jake Connor on one side.
Yeah, I think he'll be the perfect coach for Jake, because Jake's ability is phenomenal, isn't it? But it's just been doing it at the right time and in the right context.
The thing about Jake is one of those guys, who will niggle opponents. But which is fine, but you've got to be able to take it as well. And all too often he's unsettled by not just opponents, by the referee. If the referee gives a decision he doesn't like, it upsets him.
I don't think you'll see that this year.
You've got to just accept it and not be upset, not let it affect you psychologically.
I don't think you'll see that this year, Marty.
Well, that'll be great.
Or if you do, I think he'll be sat with me in stands watching. So.
Maybe even commentating, John. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. That's the thing I never understand. Like, John, have you ever seen someone on the field overturn or convince a referee to overturn a decision?
No, that's the thing that you always say to players. He's not going to change his mind. So forget about what's happened and stay in the moment and play the next play.
That's right. We'll wait and see. But I do agree. Brad Arthur, he's going to have a positive impact on some of their youngsters there. Anything you fellas would like to touch on before we get out of here? We've been going for a while now. But
I think we've touched quite a lot of things.
I'm really looking forward to the season, but I'm also looking forward to Australia coming over here. We haven't played Australia for so long, and we need to be playing them regular.
We do.
And we need this test series at the end of the season to be an absolute. So again, commercial men, I'm laying it on you to sell out all those as well, and let's England perform so that we get a 2-1 win.
Yeah,
that's it, especially with the British and Irish Lions tour in Australia this year. We need to follow it up with a strong
that'll be
tournament
massively.
over here.
I mean, the hype behind that will be unbelievable.
Oh yeah,
and the likelihood is that the British and Irish Lions will win, especially if they've got Andy Farrell as their head coach. Yeah. So we need to equalise that, and I'm certain that we could at the end of the year. So that's. Although I'm looking forward to the season, I'm looking forward, especially that'll take it to another level.
To win the Ashes again would be absolutely sensational, wouldn't it?
It would.
You know, and it would be beyond anything else that anybody could imagine for rugby league, I think.
I just imagine like the positive impact that'll have on rugby league as well.
In the meantime, I think I'm going to propose John for chairman of the RFL to actually sell the Ashes series, which would be great at doing, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, gents, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks very much for coming on again, John. Always
absolute
welcome,
pleasure,
mate.
Jake. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on. And we'll wrap it up and do it again next week, Martyn.
Okay, thanks,
awesome.
mate.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Bye.